From Nirvana's bass player to the lead singer of Iron Maiden, these are famous rock stars who work normal jobs now. And we have to start with Blink-182's drummer, who was fired and went on to become a cop. Before Travis Barker was a household name, Scott Raynor was responsible for the drumming that helped shape the band. So how does someone go from rapidly climbing the charts to losing it all so quickly? While his peers were focused on school, he was literally figuring out how to tour and record in the studio for the first time. And this schedule really took its toll, as eventually Scott turned to alcohol to deal with the pressure. But these struggles didn't just affect him, they were adding stress to the whole band. Creative tensions were rising because they all wanted different things. Mark and Tom wanted one sound and label, while Scott wanted another, and the drinking only made things worse. By 1998, he was given an ultimatum: either get sober and go to rehab, or quit the band. While Scott planned on going to treatment, he was fired shortly after and replaced by Travis Barker. Raynor later stated, "The best way for me to put it is that everything got kinda haywire in my personal life and in the band. They wanted different things than me, and at the same time our friendship was put to the test. Music turned into music business, and I wasn't ready to deal with the game. So guess who got kicked overboard?" After Blink-182, Scott stayed in music, playing with a few different bands, but he also channeled his previous struggles into helping others. He dedicated his time to Stand Up for Kids, which supports homeless youth, and taught music to teens in trouble with the law. And even with a life dedicated to music, in 2023 he opted for a career switch no one saw coming. After 6 months of training, he was sworn in as a police officer for the San Diego Police Department and has been supporting his community ever since. But while a cop is an interesting career path for a rock star, making million-dollar accessories is even stranger, and that's exactly what Dan Spitz is up to. Dan wasn't just the lead guitarist for Anthrax, he was a pioneer in the thrash metal genre. But he somehow went from playing with a band for 12 years and selling 10 million records to walking away from it all. Since childhood, Dan had a fascination with watches and the intricate mechanics behind how they worked. This was something in the back of his mind during his entire career, so eventually he enrolled at WASTEP, an elite watchmaking program located in Switzerland.
I was lucky enough to gain access to a school where 6 people are chosen from around the world every 3 years.
During his time here, Dan didn't just study watchmaking, he'd go on to master it, earning his degree as a mechanical complication specialist, a title reserved for those who work on the most intricate and luxurious watches.
As far as the timepieces that I work on, the watches usually start at 50,000 and go up to 2 or 3 million.
Dan went from being a legend in the big four of thrash metal to one of the greatest living watchmakers in the world. And while his new job is pretty unique, our next rock star switched careers because of a life-altering health scare. Bill Berry is known for being the original drummer of R.E.M, but a lot of people don't know that he's actually a multi-instrumentalist. The guy played guitar, piano, bass, and mandolin for their songs, while also being a songwriter helping with hits like Everybody Hurts. Bill is truly a gifted musician. Unfortunately, in 1995, while on a tour in Switzerland, he suffered an aneurysm mid-set.
Drummer Bill Berry is in a Swiss hospital recuperating from the emergency craniotomy he underwent after suffering a hemorrhage on the surface of his brain during last Wednesday's concert.
While the procedure saved his life, it changed his outlook on everything. The experience made him reevaluate his priorities, and in less than 2 years, he'd walk away from the band.
There was some sad news last week for R.E.M fans, because Bill Berry, the band's drummer, decided to leave after 18 years.
Well, when you don't have the enthusiasm that for 17 years I've managed to have, matched with these guys, you know, you need to make a change.
After stepping back, Bill settled down with his family in Farmington, Georgia. They bought a ton of land, and he made the career switch to hay farmer, where he's found true happiness in the work. I would never go on vacation. Vacation for me is right here. I spent enough time in airports and in vans and on buses. I kind of just like sitting still for a while. Still haven't grown tired of that. Although, Bill also once admitted that he sort of regretted leaving the group, knowing that it made it a lot harder for his bandmates. Luckily, in 2024, R.E.M reunited for the first time in 17 years for the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Bill got to have one more memorable send-off after stepping away from the spotlight all those years ago. But Bruce Dickinson found a way to balance 2 careers he loved while somehow being extraordinary at both of them. When Bruce replaced Iron Maiden's lead singer in '81, everything changed for the band. Now, they were already successful, but Bruce's vocals took things to another level, and they came out swinging with the album Number of the Beast. This new lineup killed it for over a decade, but by the early 90s, tensions were starting to form. The band never had any extreme drama, but Bruce wanted to explore other things musically and eventually walked away in '93.
There was a lot of long-standing reasons, but ultimately the main one was entirely musical. I've always had a good relationship with them and still do, and I think they understand that what I want to do in terms of music is probably going to be a bit too broad to be covered by Iron Maiden.
Bruce spent the next few years focusing on his solo career, which was pretty successful, and during this time he also took up an interest in aviation. After a 6-year hiatus, Iron Maiden reunited in 1999, and not long after, Bruce committed to his other hobby as well, officially getting his pilot's license. And he didn't dabble in aviation, the dude went all in. He began as a commercial pilot for British World Airlines, before joining Australis Airlines as a captain flying a Boeing 757. But here's the absolute craziest part. Bruce didn't just pilot commercial planes, that Boeing was Iron Maiden's tour plane, Ed Force One. He actually flew the band and crew around the world for tours. But that's not even close to the most impressive flights Bruce has done. In 2006, he piloted a rescue mission, helping evacuate over 200 UK citizens from Lebanon. In 2008, he brought home troops from Afghanistan, reuniting a ton of soldiers with their families. That same year, following a collapse of XL Airways, he stepped in to fly 180 travelers from Egypt back home to the UK. Bruce has flown around world leaders, professional soccer teams, but in 2020, he actually retired from commercial piloting. This was to focus on his aviation company, Cardav. They specialize in aircraft maintenance, repair, pilot training, amongst a ton of other things while supplying over 100 jobs. Bruce Dickinson being a pilot is out of the blue, but it's not as random as Nirvana's bass player running for president. Kris Novoselic was with Nirvana from the very beginning, but after Kurt Cobain passed, he took an unexpected leap into the world of American politics. Although, this didn't come out of nowhere. His journey began in 1992 when Washington State proposed the erotic music law. This bill would allow courts to label albums erotic and then ban sales to anyone under the age of 18.
A group of anti-censorship protesters, among them bassist Kris Novoselic of Nirvana, gathered at the state capitol in Olympia to state their opposition to it.
Kris and Nirvana thought this was censorship, so the band fought back with benefit concerts and a public campaign to shut down the bill.
Government should maybe control speed limits, and by what standards are you going to consider what's free or what's illicit and what's clean?
But years later, this same bill would resurface, forcing Kris to take it head-on, co-founding an organization called Jam Pack.
Jam Pack stands for the Joint Artist and Music Promotions Political Action Committee, and it's a political advocacy group for musicians, bands, people who work within the music industry.
And by 2004, Kris's passion for reform had grown even larger. At one point, he even considered running for lieutenant governor of Washington, but eventually decided against it. Instead, he channeled the passion into writing. That same year, he published a book called Grunge and Government, which details his musical journey alongside his vision for political change. However, his exact political views are kinda hard to pin down. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, socialist, moderate, I don't know, which he then followed up by giving a lot of criticisms to both sides. Shortly after this, he criticized and complimented Trump in a Facebook post, which led to a ton of backlash from fans, with Kris later clarifying his stance. As an avowed independent, I don't endorse any major party or candidate, and it feels insane to have to say this, but I don't support fascism and I don't support an authoritarian state. For Kris, it seems like it's mainly about finding a path forward. In 2023, he joined the board of the Forward Party, a central political movement founded by Andrew Yang. Then in 2024, he founded the Cascade Party of Washington, aiming to offer an alternative to the two-party system. To qualify this party as official, Kris did something pretty insane. He announced a symbolic run for president in 2024. After getting the 1,000 signatures they needed, he withdrew from the race, establishing his party and proving his commitment to change. Kris has spent years refining his skills in politics, but Jeff "Skunk" Baxter's career switch has him topped by advising Congress on actual missile defense. If you don't know who Skunk is, he was mostly known for his incredible guitar work with Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers, but his career switch might be one of the most badass in music history.
56-year-old Jeff Baxter has 8 platinum albums and 2 Grammys, but he likes to call himself a hippie rock guitarist with top-secret clearances.
Baxter was part of Steely Dan's OG lineup, working on their first 3 albums before joining the Doobie Brothers in 1974. When I said this guy was an incredible guitarist, I wasn't exaggerating. He was literally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2020. But back to the mid-80s, where his interest in music took a super weird turn. He was fascinated by the tech of recording equipment and began studying it alongside military hardware. His neighbor at the time just so happened to be a retired missile engineer who had actually worked on the Sidewinder project, the first practical heat-seeking missile. These two really hit things off. And over the years, Baxter taught himself a ton about missile defense and even wrote a paper to his congressman about converting one of the US's anti-aircraft systems.
So one day, I don't know what happened, I sat down at my Tandy 200 and wrote this paper about how to convert the Aegis weapon system, why it would make sense to convert it to do theater missile defense, because it would be on a mobile platform. I have no idea. I just did it.
The paper was so impressive, the congressman offered him a job, thus launching his second career as a defense consultant for the United States of America. Since then, he's worked with NASA and continues to advise the government on missile defense and cyber warfare. And while Baxter found his calling in something extreme, our next rock star went on to become one of the top 5 greatest pumpkin growers in all of America. When Jim Martin joined Faith No More in 1983, he brought a fresh, heavy guitar style sound to the band that fans were in love with. And over the next decade, he'd helped shape some of their biggest hits like Epic, while also contributing to their first 4 albums. But behind the scenes, things weren't as good as they appeared. In '93, after the album Angel Dust, fighting within the band was at an all-time high, especially between Martin and Mike Patton, who were clashing creatively. This infighting would lead to Martin walking away, although he did try to stay in music. In '97, he released a solo album, and then played with another band into the early 2000s. But ultimately, he felt like the passion wasn't there anymore. So he left the scene and moved with his family to the countryside. It's here where he started to explore his other interests, finding an unexpected passion in cultivating giant pumpkins. Super random hobby, but Jim didn't take it lightly. My guy went on to place in multiple competitions, and at one point grew a pumpkin that was over 1,000 pounds. In interviews since leaving the scene, he said he's content with how things turned out. While he still loves music and even played with Metallica for their 30th anniversary, he's made it clear that he has no real interest in making it his career again. Jim truly found peace outside of music, but so did Terry Chimes, founding drummer of The Clash, who went on to do something to better his community. Now, Terry played drums on the band's debut album, but unlike his bandmates, he wasn't in it for the long haul. He left for a short time after the first album's release, but decided to permanently walk away in 1983. He did go on to play with bands like Hanoi Rocks and Black Sabbath, but Terry felt like something was missing and really didn't like how unstable the music industry was. And that's when he made a decision no one in the rock scene was expecting. Terry enrolled in chiropractic college and the London School of Acupuncture. Here, he'd earned multiple qualifications in musculoskeletal care. By 1994, he'd go on to found Chimes Chiropractic, a clinic that specializes in helping patients with back, neck, and sports injuries. He started out with a single clinic, and over the years it's turned into a fully fledged practice known for its outstanding work. Terry still plays music occasionally, and even released a book called The Strange Case of Dr. Terry and Mr. Chimes, a unique story of his life as a rock drummer turned healthcare professional. While it may seem sad to walk away from being a rock star, a lot of these guys prove that life after music can be just as epic.